everyone, to the MMA Freakcast. I'm Edson Valenzuela.
And I'm Matthew Salzer.
And we haven't spoken since UFC Fight Night Sao Paulo, Brazil, where the main event was Hollywood Dan Henderson versus Vitor the Phenom Belfort.
Yes, in which Belfort sealed the deal on the trilogy by defeating Henderson by TKO for the second time. And at which point, a lot of people are saying that Dan Henderson should retire, which, incidentally, I agree, because he has nothing else to prove.
Well, we've been able to get the camp on with us a couple of times on the site, so maybe we'll be able to talk to him ourselves and see if he has any plans for that. But he still has not spoken out about that, right?
Yeah, I think the problem with Dan Henderson is he's one of those guys who just loves to compete, and maybe not necessarily because of the money, because we know he's set. He owns Clinch Gear. They probably bring in who knows how much,
in cash or revenue or whatnot.
And then he owns at least the team, the Temecula Valley Team Quest, and he's got
his gym set up. He's got merchandising set up. He's been doing it so long that he's sort of probably been able to bank some fat sponsorship cash from before the Reebok deal.
And he's probably still got those sponsors because big guys are gonna be able to hold on to those sponsors regardless. So yeah, he doesn't really need to do it for money. I think that even at age 45, he still just wants to compete, which unfortunately I think age is starting to catch up with him. So
to be fair, Team Quest has always maybe sort of been in it for. You can view them as a team that was in it for competition. If their origins sort of were in, we are Olympic American wrestlers, and we want to
Couture, Linlin, Henderson,
Rulon Gardner.
Oh yeah, he joined ever so briefly.
For
his one fight in Pride.
Sort of a tour de force performance. He was a little oversized maybe, but he beat the crap out of Yoshida.
He normally weighed that much anyways.
Just compared, rather, that fight would have not likely happened under today's, or rather UFC's.
Oh yeah, he would have had to cut 20 pounds.
There you are.
He would have had to cut 20 pounds.
But it was still fascinating to watch. Sort of that style of, and that was sort of. So what we're referring to, what Matt and I are referring to, are in maybe the late 90s, early 2000s. Randy Couture had emerged in the UFC. I think he had also fought in rings, and Pancrase as well. Maybe just rings.
I think it was just rings.
Okay, and
he fought in rings in the UFC. Yeah.
I think Henderson also might have fought in rings.
Oh yeah, he did. That's where he made a name for himself. Because he beat Big Nog at one point. Big Nog.
Yes, the heavyweight Minotauro Nogueira.
Yeah.
And then
Linlin flopped all over the place too. They were like all over the
spectrum. Didn't find as much success, but one of the impressive things I think that Team Quest was able to accomplish with two of its fighters, Couture and Henderson in specific, what them as a team were able to accomplish were two fighters that to some degree became known later in mixed martial artists as sort of generally well-rounded fighters.
Yeah, definitely. They started out as wrestlers, and then they developed the striking game. Well, the thing about Couture is that I read his profile. He supposedly did some boxing in when he was in the army, and of course he already had that wrestling background, so he already knew how to utilize that. Basically, he already had that base, but he just developed that as it went along. And then the same with let's see, Henderson. I don't think so. I think he's been open
about not having sort of formal striking training, yes?
Yeah, but and then he got it from, and then as things went on, and it became more beneficial to develop a striking game. They would include people in Team Quest, and
in the case of Henderson, it's impressive because wouldn't you say what? So let's say word association or something along the lines. You and I were playing that. What is a signature? What would you say is a signature component of Dan Henderson's offensive arsenal?
Oh, definitely that right hand.
That H-bomb.
Yeah, that especially when you watch that fight where he goes up against
there's a couple.
Michael Bisping, Vanderlei Silva, and then not only does he take him out, he follows it up with the on the floor
with the flying Superman boom.
Yes,
that was a tough one.
Yeah, on both those guys. And I especially love it against Michael Bisping because Michael Bisping.
And he didn't need to be like that, Michael Bisping. He was like that for the betterment of nothing. I feel like
he's still like that. He's still like that. He's a middle range. He never broke the top 5 either at light heavyweight or middleweight, no. And he's barely ranked.
Yeah.
So and and honestly, I think he's at a point where he should seriously consider retirement because there's nothing.
Stop retiring everybody. You're retiring everybody. Retire Hendo. Retire Bisping.
Well, let's look at this from. Let's consider this. They're old guys who've been through. They're older guys who've been through a lot of wars. I mean, Bisping has been through a lot of wars.
He's had his bell rung as well.
Henderson has been through a lot of wars.
Him definitely, and not only that, but his record reflects. I think what upwards of 30, 40 fights now at this point.
Something like that. So it's kind of a point where. Do you want to keep fighting and end up like Gary Goodrich, or do you want to call it out some point? Yeah. And with some of those guys, we've seen guys who have, we've seen several guys like Brian Stan, Kenny Florian. They get jobs with Fox Sports, and
they're able to sort of continue a career on after they're fighting.
Yeah, and then you also see guys like Chuck Liddell, Matt Hughes. Guys like that, where they become company men and they get to stay, they get to keep on, they get
cash in a paycheck and have maybe an administrative position or something like that.
In the UFC, there's for legendary guys, there are definitely outlets, and then I'm going to hesitate to
go ahead, sure.
We're objective, and then for guys like I'm just gonna say like Frank Shamrock,
okay,
who who's still making a career, and then also Randy Couture, who are basically making a career outside of the UFC, is still in that community.
And also, to be fair, Henderson is someone who has had that relationship as well before. He's not been afraid before to sort of hold out or to go sign with Joe Schmo over there for extra money.
Yeah, he signed with Strikeforce out of when he was having issues with
got reabsorbed twice then in a sense, right?
Yeah,
got reabsorbed one with the Pride deal, and then got reabsorbed with the Strikeforce deal. That's pretty awesome. I know you wanted to run down a couple things though for the news.
Yeah.
So maybe we shouldn't get hung up on that. But was there any other fight that happened that night? There was a Mark Hunt fight.
Yeah, the Mark Hunt fight. No.
That wasn't that night?
That was not that night. That was the same night as UFC 193. So
all right, okay. Sorry.
So anyways,
so now you like I said, you wanted to run down some stuff from the Sao Paulo until pretty much now.
Okay, so there's been a variety of stuff going on. I'm gonna go over
before we get to the Rousey stuff.
Let's see.
We'll go over other stuff.
Let's see. I'm gonna go over
stuff after the Rousey stuff.
I'm gonna go over this last weekend.
Okay.
Last.
2 ago.
Okay. So so major events have happened since
we last sat down.
Yes, since we last sat down.
It's been about 3 weeks. 2.5 weeks.
It was announced that Glory Kickboxing is going to be streamed on ESPN3.com. That's ESPN's major online outlet. So that's so it's nice to see that Glory's actually is going there, which I'd argue might even be a bigger audience than Spike.
Okay.
So there's that. Shamrock versus Gracie 3 was announced as the next major, the first major Bellator event of the first quarter. Kimbo Slice is also fighting on that card
next year.
Fedor,
that'll get some eyeballs on it.
Yeah, that'll get
for what it is.
For what it is. It's 2 old guys
and Kimbo.
It's two old guys looking like two steaks in a Tupperware box. Is basically, to quote Adam the Blampede. Shout out to What Culture WWE, Adam the Blampede.
Shout out.
So
go on.
But yeah, there's that for people who like the very old style. So
for people who want some old school MMA.
Yeah, and then Fedor's opponent was announced. It's going to be Tsuyoshi Kosaka, the guy who for the longest time had the only win against him, and it was controversial because Rings was not supposed to have.
Give me
elbows.
a chance to go over this with people so that they have an idea of what might have happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so
let's go over this specific.
In Japan, Rings used to be one of those fight organizations that had one-night tournaments.
Not one-night tournaments, long-term tournaments. Yeah, but yeah, they would have multiple
from the same bracket in the same night.
Yes, they would have it. This was like a round 2 or round. This was like a second or third night,
quarter semi or something like that.
Yeah, but this was one of those like multiple bracket. This was like the 24-man, 36-man tournament or something like that. It was a large tournament. Rings did large tournaments.
I'm fairly certain if you want to find it, you'll be able to find this online.
Oh, yeah, you'll be able to find it.
So the fight starts. And within about 20 seconds, the men sort of meet up and kind of tussle. And I think, TK does go in with an elbow. Is that right?
No, the way that I saw it, they were swinging. And it's just that, they got into close proximity. And he threw that. And it's just that his elbow.
And this is all very, very fast.
Yeah,
because it's sort of swinging and then tying up. Yes? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and then.
And then immediate separation because there might have been blood.
There was a lot of blood.
Yeah.
Fedor got cut over the eye. He couldn't continue. And normally that would be either a DQ or no contest under ring rules. Because it was a tournament, someone had to move on. So Kosaka was given the win. Now,
what people don't ever consider, by the way, and we were just talking about him earlier, is that if Fedor wins this, Fedor and Randy Couture face each other in the finals. I do believe I'm not full of crap. I'm pretty sure this is the truth, so I'll double check it. But I'm pretty sure that Randy Couture ended up winning that night or that tournament.
I don't think he did actually.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think.
Tune in next time.
He lost to Enson Inoue.
Oh goodness!
And Rings.
Anyway,
very forgotten guy, Enson Inoue.
Enson Inoue. He's the one that got knocked out by Heath Herring for kissing him.
No, that was another guy. That was a Japanese guy.
Sorry.
That was a pure Japanese guy. Enson Inoue is Japanese American.
Okay. And I'm gonna double check because I'm remembering that incorrectly. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So let's see.
So anyway, they're refighting. They're fighting again. They're doing another fight.
They're fighting with Fedor's new home of Risen Fighting Federation.
If Fedor wins, he brushes away the one questionable loss that he has.
Well, he already avenged that loss.
You're right.
This is a rubber match.
You're
Not
right.
It matters.
I forgot about that.
Kosaka is in his 40s, hasn't fought in, I think, 10 years or something like that, whereas Fedor has had a much smaller retirement window.
Yeah. Also... what do you think?
Okay, I'm going off of old news then.
That was
my apologies. I'm going off of old news.
Quickly, handle it.
Okay, so
according to
it's Kosaka is facing James Thompson at Risen. So
according to MMAfighting.com.
Yeah, according to MMAfighting.com. So that's my bad on me.
But whatever. Still boring.
Yeah, basically. So and then Fedor. Who else is there to possibly match Fedor against? I hope they don't. I hope they don't match him up against what's the dude's name.
We talked about this, and wasn't Mighty Mo isn't he sort of tangentially related to this, or no? Is this incorrect? Is he signed by anybody at the time?
Mighty Mo. Oh my gosh. Last time I saw
is it really that far of a cry to put Fedor against somebody like a Mighty Mo? I think or Bobby Lashley.
Bobby Lashley would make more sense.
Okay.
Mighty Mo, it's like doesn't really make sense as much. I actually met the guy at when I worked when I covered a Bellator event, and he's a nice guy. But in terms of the overall fighting skills, that night that I watched him, I saw him get KO'd by Alexander Volkov with a head kick, and he just went.
Down he went.
Yeah, and we know that he's a stocky guy.
He's a strong dude. But sort of one of those loudmouth, silenced situations that we'll get.
Mighty Mo?
Yeah.
Mighty Mo's a loudmouth? I wasn't aware that Mighty Mo's a loudmouth. Mighty Mo?
With the crown?
You're thinking King Mo.
Oh, no! We're having the worst podcast so far.
I'm thinking of the pudgy, stocky guy who's I think he's maybe Samoan, and he's thinking about the African American wrestler.
We're so far out of orbit right now.
Clearly.
Let's put on the thrusters and head back towards home.
Okay, you know what? Let's finish that conversation and let's talk about the Veterans Day top 10 that I did.
Yes, that sounds excellent.
The Veterans Day top 10. So yeah, I did a Veterans Day top 10 on the top 10 veterans of the past year.
And this on MMAfreak.com if you want to check it out.
It is on MMAfreak.com. So I did in order. I listed Brandon Vera, Liz Carmouche, Eric Prindle, Mike Rickman.
This is from 10 down to 1.
Yes, Luigi Fioravanti, Bobby Lashley, Clinton Williams, Justin Governal, Colton Smith, and Neil Magny.
All right.
Who had that Neil Magny, because he was his winning streak finally got snapped, which included that 5 fight win streak last year, but he's still doing pretty good. So I'd say he
still deserves that top spot.
Yeah, and he's a very respectable guy, and
then that's awesome and thoughtful of you, obviously, to take a moment to acknowledge the veterans of mixed martial arts, and I think that's another aspect of mixed martial arts that some might not know about, which is a lot of military folk find it pretty easy to transition into MMA because they have a combat background.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tim Kennedy is not on the list because he's been inactive for the past year. So I was able to actually get active guys on the list this year as compared to last year, where because I couldn't find enough guys, I ended up putting Randy Couture and Brian and Stan on there, despite the fact that they'd been inactive so long, so that they could, specifically saying, oh, they were involved in commentary and Randy Couture's involved in movies and whatnot, and blah 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 blah. So, that was that Veterans Day top 10. So,
go check that out on the site too.
Yes, shout out to the veterans.
All the vets.
Yes.
All the vets. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for keeping our country safe. Okay. So
let's see.
Okay, so moving on to our news updates. So Crow Cop got busted in a WADA test.
And Rousey's still forthcoming going.
Yes. Mirko Crow Cop got busted in a WADA test, and right before that was actually announced, he announced his retirement, saying it was an injury, but it may have been both at the same time. And then people are kind of questioning,
what sort of test was it again? I'm sorry.
WADA was a drug test.
Okay.
World Administration Doping. I forget what the
agency. Whatever.
Yeah.
Point is, got caught doping, according to the World WADA.
Yeah, they haven't released the details as of yet.
And he concurrently retired, so it sort of makes it not that difficult to believe that maybe there was something funky going on there.
Yeah, people, honestly, on some of the podcasts, Ted Check, for example, that have been going around, they talked about...
Shout out to Ted.
Yeah, shout out to Ted. They mentioned the fact that Crow Cop kind of looked a little bit bigger in Pride than he did he has recently, and some people have pointed out the fact that in Pride there was no drug testing. There was no, and Ensign Inouye's contract specifically said he will not be drug tested. Then, incidentally,
well, that's a difficult. That's always been something that's been sort of a tough thing for MMA fans to be sort of open about, let's say, in discussing, and that's that there have always been these rumblings that in Japan, a lot of the fighters were sort of noticeably different in size and in performance. You just named a few examples. I'll throw on a couple of two more.
Oh, we could. Go ahead.
Let me give you two more.
Yes.
Don Fry and Ken Shamrock.
Oh, and then on top of that, I could throw in Mark Kerr.
Yes,
because we saw that in the Smashing Machine documentary. He was shooting up in between his fights and going out there and fighting, and and we know Mark Kerr,
would be the confirmed case, let's say, right?
Yes,
because there was a documentary that was sort of focused on that. The others though, people have speculated as well, in that, the ones I mentioned specifically, Fry and Shamrock, that there's a noticeable difference in size and muscle mass between the time that they were in the UFC in their early years, sort of medium-sized dudes, and maybe they did take on, an extreme powerlifting regimen.
Yeah.
But there was definitely a noticeable difference in musculature and performance, sort of a higher degree of, a higher level of endurance, let's say, in fights.
Honestly, I think that.
Though this is reckless speculation.
Honestly, I think they were smaller when they were in Pride than when they were in the UFC, because
Go on.
Because Ken Shamrock, he walked around at about 240 when he was fighting his early days in the UFC, and he was considerably lighter when he
was over at Pride.
When he was over at Pride, he was probably a good 20 pounds lighter or something like that. Maybe that had something to do with
the
his
perception.
Well, not only that, maybe it had to do with something with his time in the WWE. I don't know.
As well, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I do remember. Yes, that is his deltoids were noticeably much more massive in Pride.
Yeah, and he has admitted to taking steroids, and there was a point where he was busted at one point.
Oof.
So
Crow Cop now he's under fire. He's retired. He's out of here.
Yeah.
Dang.
And it's unfortunate considering that he's normally a nice guy, and to see his career end on something like that.
Yeah, he's also not only that, but an iconic heavyweight for the sport.
Yeah, similar to how Vanderlei, his ended. On kind of an unceremonial note. There's been several fighters who their careers end on a very unceremonial note. Chael Sonnen's another one. Vanderlei, Crow Cop is the latest. It's unfortunate to see their
Chris leaving. I'm just as a joke. I mean, he's retired.
But he retired on a loss where he didn't actually test positive for anything.
Oh, sorry. Well, yeah, that's all. That's unfortunate. It speaks to the larger issue of performance-enhancing drugs and what their place are in all sports, not just mixed martial arts.
Yes.
And I think that it's something that mixed martial arts fans have sort of been intimately and keenly aware of for a good amount of time, and perhaps where other fans of other sports might be more naive.
Yes.
And it's because of the sort of international nature of the sport. Because we know that in Japan they weren't doing PED testing,
Yes.
That's the sort of thing that somebody that say is a fan of Major League Baseball, they might not ever run into that train of thought, because it's anything that's sort of going on there is all sort of, for all intents and purposes, happening under the cover of darkness, secretly,
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Not as much of an open secret as it might have been in Japan. So after the Crow Cop retirement announcement, there was some action over with Bellator and them expanding a weight division.
Expanding, actually international expansion. They're looking at this next year. They're actually looking at holding international events, and we're not talking just North America, Canada, America, Canada. They're
this hemisphere.
They're looking at Tel Aviv and London as two possible ones, and because of their partnership with Rizin, they're looking at Rizin as well.
Maybe Heffernan, Mr. Tom Heffernan from MMAFreak.com, might be able to stop over at some of those bad boys.
Yes.
By the way, congrats to him, and covering the Bear Jew, Paul Craig.
Yes.
During his ascent, following him along the way.
Yes.
He's Paul Craig was a light heavyweight for Bama. And now he's a champion, and Heffernan was covering and interviewing that young man before he was champion. So congratulations to Paul Craig. Check him out on Twitter. I think it's P Craig MMA @PCraigMMA, and check out Heffernan, Tom Heffernan at Heffy. That's HEFFIE Jr. All one word, JR.
Yes. So okay, there's that, and then before we get to more recent events. So the more More recent piece of news is that Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort 2 has been announced for Brazil.
Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort 2, Brazil. You and I guessed this, I believe.
Yes, we did.
Ha!
Where Silva
and
was,
it's saved for posterity,
Yes.
so nobody could ever tell us that we're full of garbage.
Yes, Silva was saying that he
Yes.
wanted to fight in Brazil, and we brought up that idea as maybe one of the fights. So and I think Belfort wants to capitalize on that recent one against Henderson and probably continue that momentum.
We also
If
did
he
mention
can't avenge his loss to Silva, and then maybe even ride that wave of momentum up to a rematch against Weidman, but we'll see how that goes.
Also, it's worth mentioning that same podcast where we thought that it might be a possibility that those gentlemen did face off over there, we also were mentioning that Verdum had asked for a rematch in Brazil as well.
Yes.
So who's to say that they don't add them to the card and that we're not triply right?
Let's.
That would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, that would definitely be.
Can you really quickly give me the link to the podcast? So that's pretty awesome, actually. I'm okay, and maybe it's, and now more than ever, people may be inclined to put a little bit of cash on Vitor now that they've seen give me one. Hold on, I got this. Go back on there real quick. Now that people have seen that Anderson Silva can indeed be toppled, those two devastating losses that he suffered against Chris Weidman sort of had to have humbled him. You can't help but imagine that that the spider has been rattled, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, and then on top of that, we saw the emotions of the emotions that came out when he fought Nick Diaz, as much as he tested positive for steroids or on that one, and I still don't buy that he's saying that it was a supplement. He's no. His claim was that it was an impurity in the sex enhancing drug that he took for his wife. I just don't buy that at all. It's like Viagra doesn't do that.
Yes. And it's an embarrassing thing, I think, for an athlete to admit to, no matter what. So, it's a sort of it's been an awkward situation. I think it's interesting that both of those gentlemen have been embroiled in some sort of PED scandal at some point. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, Belfort. Yeah, definitely.
What happened there?
Well, Belfort tested positive for steroids back in Pride.
Mm-hmm.
But when they did one of those stateside tests, those stateside events brought out a lot.
Yes, they brought a lot to light.
Yeah, it exposed because it exposed Pride. These guys were just so used to fighting without
any repercussions or restrictions,
and they got caught in a basically with their pants down, and that brought forth Nick Diaz's also let's just say recreational habits as well. And
that's a one way to put it. That is one way to put it.
And yeah, brought forth
it's a continuing morphing, evolving sort of
Oh, and then on top of that, you had he was in back when what's it called? Back when TRT was legal, it was it had an issue there as well, where he got that
yes.
He got the what's it called?
And we're talking Belfort still.
Yes.
Well, he was sort of integral in having him and Henderson, I do believe, were integral in Dana White sort of finally deciding to put his foot down and saying TRT no mas?
Actually, it was not Dana White. It was the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
The Nevada State Athletic Commission saying TRT no mas.
Yeah, there was just so much controversy around that, and they were just like, you know what?
But those were the two gentlemen who the eyeballs were on at that time. Am I correct?
There was that, Frank Mir, Rampage Jackson, Ben Rothwell.
Thank you.
There was just a whole lot of them out there.
And those are big names.
Yeah,
those are marquee names.
Dennis Hallman's
he's a was about to use a bad word. He is a longtime MMA veteran with wins over Matt Hughes, dagnabbit.
Yes. Yeah, and so there was a lot of fighters who had who were on TRT, and they were getting these subscriptions, and the commissions were granting them. Oh, Nate Marquardt was another one. Sonnen is the best example because he's the first guy who got busted for elevated levels of testosterone, and they're like, "What's he on?" And he's like, "I was on TRT."
So I mean, it continues. We continue. MMA goes on, and this might actually lead into some stuff we have to say about Holly Holm that was in the news recently.
Yeah.
But first, we'll cover some other stuff.
Yes.
Ronda Rousey is still on her way.
Yes. So
as far as being discussed, not like on the phone or nothing, because we don't have those sort of connections.
I think that since we all covered other news, the other events we could just go over very quickly.
Yeah.
So the thing that I want to talk in depth today about is, of course, the biggest news in the MMA world still, which is the fall of the Rowdy One.
The fall of the Rowdy One, Ronda Rousey. This is not only one of the biggest news stories in MMA today.
It could possibly be the biggest news story of the year.
It will very likely be the biggest news story of the year, MMA news story of the year. And also it will very likely go down in the history of mixed martial arts as a very important moment, one of the most impressive performances.
And arguably also one of the largest upsets.
One of the largest upsets in both I will argue perceivably it was not as big of an upset as it might have come across perceivably to some individuals.
Well, we could say that about a lot of things. We could say that about the Chris Weidman fight. We could say that about the Chris Weidman and Silva one. We could say that about Hinam Barral versus TJ Dillashaw one. We could say that about a lot of fighters, but I guess hold on. One thing to remember though is that a lot of people were saying Chris Weidman was. A lot of people were saying Chris Weidman could pull it off, which he did.
Yeah. So I'll note this, that I do believe that the Rousey bout falls into the camp of fights that you're mentioning, and not so much into the camp of Matt Serra over GSP, or help me out with one more sort of silly, crazy upset.
We're talking about could be
just sort of
flukes.
There you are.
Yeah,
and I do believe that some people might be treating this one, and I might be making it up, but I do believe that some people are treating it on the order of magnitude of that, and it's let's just pump the brakes a tiny bit because Holly Holm was very much the decorated fighter up until this point. Right?
Yes, let's be honest. Matt Serra versus GSP won. It could be considered a fluke because anyone could get a lucky punch in. Sarah went in there and he traded with GSP.
And,
GSP
Sarah
shouldn't have done that.
A veteran of the game.
Yeah, and he caught him just right, and GSP went down. Anyone can fall like that very easily. It's very easy for a fluke of something like that to happen. And then the next fight, he went out there and just destroyed him.
The performance that we saw by Holly Holm against Ronda Rousey was more indicative of, and you tell me if I'm crazy, the flowing nature of fight styles that you and I were discussing just last podcast, which is there's an ebb and a flow. And Ronda Rousey was not invincible to that. And Ronda Rousey is first a wrestler, second to everything else, or first a wrestler / grappler,
grappler. Let's go with grappler.
And then everything else, and then she's a striker after that. Let's say everything else is secondary to that. You could even say that her submissions might also be even secondary just to the grappling or judo wrestling ability. Being able to get people on the ground. She's a top class athlete, but At the end of the day, this is what mixed martial arts is for. It's to see, all right, now let's pit somebody who has the exact sort of counter approach to the fight that you do. She's going to try to stand. And this, we were just talking about this last podcast. We've seen this countless times in mixed martial arts. It speaks to how early it is in the sort of life cycle for women's MMA. You could very easily say Ronda Rousey was Randy Couture, Holly Holm is Chuck Liddell, or the like, something along the lines there, where for a while people thought Randy Couture is the dude who's going to ground and pound everybody into submission because nobody's going to be able to out-wrestle this dude or avoid a takedown from this guy. Chuck Liddell was like, I'm going to sprawl and brawl, and I'm going to make you come my way. Holly Holm didn't do anything that different from say, the second fight between Couture and Liddell.
I honestly don't know if that's comparable because when it can't, I can understand where you're comparing backgrounds, but in terms of styles, aggression styles, they're the direct opposite. Randy Couture, we know,
a tactician.
A tactician, yeah.
A wrestling tactician.
Yes, he was a tactician. He would go in there and he would figure out ways to win. He didn't go in there with just pure brawn. Whereas Chuck Liddell, granted, he didn't go out there with pure brawn. He had skill. He had a karate black belt, and he did have a Division I wrestling level that helped him with that sprawl and brawl.
Yeah.
But they went in with very different styles. Randy Couture was thinking, I need to take him down and then figure out a way to get the stuff done. Whereas Liddell was like, I'm going to go in and knock him out. And the aggression level was very much that same. It was very much Liddell had the bigger aggression level, whereas you can't go in there with an aggression level and expect to be an expert tactician. You just can't do that. Whereas you look at the Ronda Rousey and the
home fight.
Yeah, well, and example, Liddell, he would always go in there with a high level of aggression. That's why he went in there. He would just wail on these guys. And eventually caught up with him.
He was also a counter striker though, which is.
But he still went in there with a high level of aggression. Whereas Ronda Rousey, we saw over her career, she would go in with this high level of aggression, whether she was grappling or whether she was striking. She would go in there and she would wail on people. That didn't work out when she went against Holly Holm. Holly Holm went in with this tactician mentality. She's like, okay, this is what I need to do to finish
to pull
Ronda.
out the victory.
Yeah, to pull out the victory. Whereas Ronda Rousey went in there with this mentality, and we saw this
perhaps a bloated ego after the fight against Beth Correa.
And we also saw this with kind of this with this mentality. Also for the first time, we saw Ronda get emotional at the weigh-ins. She and Holly got in kind of a shoving. Yeah, and then she was the one who started smack talking. That's very uncharacteristic of Ronda Rousey.
So you don't know if it was the mind game before, but really quick before the fight. But very, very quickly to touch back on what we were mentioning. The only reason I specifically mentioned the Couture Liddell bouts as being sort of exemplary of what might have occurred with the Ronda and Holm fight is two things: the style differences. One is one would be considered primary, especially in retrospect, one would primarily be considered a grappler over the other one, who's primarily considered a striker.
That is true.
And to be fair, both times that Couture got his bell rung in those two fights, that is to say, Couture, Liddell 2 and 3, because Couture did pull out the victory the first fight.
Yes.
Couture was coming in both times. So that is to say, even if it wasn't with the whereas Ronda might have been perhaps diluted in her striking ability, maybe Couture was not, but it was still this matter of Liddell made sure to bide his time and to let the other person make mistakes, not necessarily to go in there and force the mistakes.
That is true. Well, and I think another thing that maybe allowed Ronda to maybe get a little too overconfident. She trained with Lucia Riker. She trained with a world-class
you mentioned this to me.
Boxer.
Boxing champ, ex-champ.
Yeah. Now, whether Lucille was specifically involved in this camp, I don't know. It would have been smart if she had been involved in this camp. I didn't see any of the preview stuff leading up to it, but it would have been smart if she had her involved in that camp. If she had not, then Ronda was at a severe disadvantage because
that apparently she was not aware of, by the way.
Yeah, and another thing is that there's also been a lot of talk about Ronda possibly considering leaving Edmund Tatarov's camp. Well, there's been a lot of people saying that she's considering leaving Glendale Fight Club.
Well, and I might be full of garbage, but I do believe I read that she sort of shortly after the bout fired her striking coach. Is that correct?
Edmund, I don't know.
So is that who specifically you're mentioning?
Yeah, he is her fighting / striking coach. So she did come home with Travis Brown, I should say. There's she was seen coming home with Travis Brown, her current boyfriend. She wasn't seen with Edmund in coming by.
Oh, okay.
So,
I see. So there, I do not believe I could find any confirmed reports about her sort of parting ways. I think that might be.
There's been a long talk. There's been rumors, and it's unconfirmed. But yeah, still there's that possibility. But another thing to keep in mind with
the ex-champ Rousey.
Yeah, is. Well, actually, no. Just another thing to just keep in mind in general is that not only is Ronda with Edmund, whose coaching capacity is now coaching abilities is coming into question, but Holly Holm is with arguably one of the best camps and one of the best coaching staffs in the MMA industry, in Greg Jackson. The Jackson Winklejohn camp. Winklejohn was her original boxing coach, and they worked together.
They're no strangers to spoiling parties as well. I do believe that they've done it twice in the light heavyweight division with Rashad Evans and John Jones.
Yes, John Jones, definitely.
You can argue that there's been a couple of fights too that they've been able to pull out in lower divisions. Diego Sanchez was a product, and I think sort of the initial prodigy to come from that camp. He sort of rose to prominence with that camp, if I remember correctly, after the UFC, or rather the Ultimate Fighter Season 1. And since then, they've had a spectacular record, right? They've had several champions, I think, in several divisions. And
yes,
they continue to make some magic happen.
Yeah, and
this was an absolutely dominant performance.
Yeah, and John Jones is going to, there's talk, it's like 90% certain that he's gonna come back, but he's still at Greg Jackson camp, and Holly Holm was and John Jones is gushing over Holly Holm. He's like, she's the best champion in the world, which I'm not sure is 100% accurate, but they're
sticking together.
It's a very close camp. Everything just came together in that fight to where she the training all just came together, and she just went out there and she knew
completely controlled and obliterated.
Yes, and of note is that the grappling, they did train. They also trained grappling, and they also like I've said before, Holly Holm is not just a one-dimensional boxer. She's a kickboxer. She has a kickboxing record. She was an amateur kickboxing champion. She has that background. So, and that's what she knocked out Ronda Rousey with. She didn't knock her out with a hard right. She knocked her out with a head kick.
And I don't know if anybody has put any emphasis on this as well, and that's that Holly Holm is a good 6 years or so older than Ronda Rousey.
Yes.
Which means that even if she did come into combat sports later in her life at 16 years old, if I believe what I read is accurate, it would still give her that little extra edge of the extra amount of time that she has been spending fighting in amateur fights, training, anything else that involves the sport of, or that would be sort of conducive to the sport of MMA. So,
another note is that Ronda has not faced anyone like Holly on several different levels. And normally I don't think that stuff like height or reach has a play in
Yeah, sure.
in something like this. But I have to point this out.
Yeah.
Holly.
It did this time, maybe.
Yes,
you know?
yes. Holly was an inch taller, and she had inch reach advantage.
Yep.
And on top of that,
with the technique, it's almost as though you're not overpowered necessarily, but there's this sense of go on though.
And then on top of that, she's I'd argue she has longer legs.
Okay, yeah.
Which only adds to those
lengthier
leg
frame.
kicks. Yeah, she just got a long, lengthier frame against
but she employed boxing and striking technique so perfectly for what. So this is how I perceived what happened. Ronda Rousey, with a sort of maybe an inflated sense of self-confidence, went in and thought within reason that she would be able to strike with Holly Holm. And I think myself, what I sort of, the filter upon which I view that through is her coming off of her big knockout victory against Beth Correa. It might have been easy for her to sort of be able to talk her and hype herself up. Hey, I can stand up. I can take these shots. Now, that was where she was wrong.
Yeah.
Each shot she took, you saw as the fight went on.
Yeah, well,
it was almost as if it was a Street Fighter 2 fight, and you could literally see the yellow bar just getting red and going down.
Well, the way I describe it is that, whenever Ronda goes out into a fight, she has that same look of intensity. She walks out there, and then she's right as the fight goes. She always has that
anger,
that anger look of intensity. Like, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna beat
Maul you. Yeah.
As every single punch that she took, that
look went away slowly.
That look went from intensity to worry. Like, yeah, she went from like
she looked noticeably anxious by the end of the first round.
Yes, she went from having that look of I'm gonna go out there, I'm gonna beat you to
what's happening.
But more like I'm in trouble. Yeah, she just had that look of we've seen that look of bewilderment before, but it's just we haven't seen it on her when she was genuinely in trouble, and she was genuinely in trouble in this fight. She went out there and it's like I said, she went out there and she realized, and she just slowly started to realize I can't grapple with her, I can't strike with her. And the one time she did manage to take it to the ground, it was a desperation move. She tried, and she didn't even hop on her back. She tried to go with that signature arm bar. The moment they started falling, you could see Holly already starting to grab her arms, which is the counter to an arm bar. And Ronda couldn't straighten her arm down, because by the time they were on the floor, Holly's gripping her arms, and Ronda's desperately trying to grab at that arm. Can't.
So it's a twofold sort of deal going on psychologically, I'd imagine, where it's I cannot impose my will on you, and also your decision making has to be affected when you're getting your bell rung. I think it's fair to say that not only did those shots maybe hurt, but disoriented her and fatigued her noticeably as the first round came to an end. Yeah. So it's like, even if you do have energy stores where you can go dip into your bag to try your next trick, she had began to amass so many shots that you can't help but think she wasn't even thinking straight anymore, or she couldn't even function at the level of strength which she would have had to enable to be able to effectively employ a strategy.
And of another note is Holly took Ronda down. The first if you could call it that, where Ronda initiated the takedown, but she had no control, but then Holly takes Ronda down and then gets out of it because she knows she didn't want to go into Ronda's realm, so she stood her up. And there's also one point that really stuck out for me. It's where Holly, Ronda, despite the fact that she was getting her rear end handed to her, was still going out there trying to do that. Holly, for the most part, was doing that circling and still trying to pick her apart.
Oh, my goodness.
But there was a point where they were going directly back against the cage, and there was a point where I thought, are they going to get into the clinch? Holly ducks.
There's a very popular GIF of this moment going around on the internet. It is embarrassing and incredible at the same time. I do believe that it's Ronda throwing a left hook, a sort of a lunging left hook. and home perfectly, timing a duck and a slip right underneath her arm, and is immediately behind her within half a second. Ronda is still looking in the direction that home was just in. Am I correct?
Yeah.
She kind of drops to a leg or a knee.
Yeah, I can almost swear that she ran to the cage.
It wasn't.
Again,
if you don't know what we're talking about, there's a GIF online. Just find, home slips Ronda or something. You'll miss it if you blink.
Yeah, and something else that was pointed out. I can't remember who said it specifically, but Holly's not only is a skilled combat athlete. She's just a good athlete in general, and that kind of skill is what allowed her to go to duck and jump and dance around.
Well,
like
and
that.
that's the experience that that's the experience that you and I have discussed. When somebody focuses the time and able to perfect the skill, it's not something that. So the direct example I'll make is Ronda Rousey's skill is judo. Though she is incredibly skilled at striking and boxing, and she has probably made great progress since she has began to work on that aspect of her game, it still came second to other fight disciplines, and the fast twitch muscle memory that is required and the repetition that is required in order for you to pull off skillful moves, say like Holly Holm being able to duck under her as if she's Neo from the Matrix, you sort of see time in slow motion. That's not something maybe that Ronda Rousey ever had to sort of get into that maximum concentration to do, because where she is elite is while grappling and wrestling. That sort of thing cannot be that you cannot make up ground for that skill level in a short amount of time, I think. And the short, even as great as we know an athlete as Ronda Rousey is, Holly Holm is also another great athlete. There's more of them in the world, and she showed us that coming in with the right skill set and what was apparently a pitch perfect game plan,
yeah,
or at least a good game plan, and you'll win, and you'll sort of shock the world, So I don't know. What do you think now that it's happened? Immediate rematch, all that. What?
I've mentioned before my belief that I believe that immediate rematches should be reserved for like very rare occasions.
Is this one of them?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
I really don't.
There are a few people who feel the same way you do.
But Holly is saying that she's willing to give Ronda the rematch. Dana White's saying it should happen.
And it wouldn't be unprecedented. It wouldn't be unprecedented.
Yeah, because we also saw that with Chris Weidman.
It's happened a couple times, yeah.
Ronda. I'm not even sure what she's just saying she's got to be back. I'm not even sure if she hasn't really
spoke out. She's just thanked her fans. She didn't even thank Holly.
Yeah, she's kind of been going a little under the radar.
I didn't get a chance to write about it. I think I still will. I do want to mention that I did not really have my thumb or my fingers on the pulse of exactly how much hate was ready to sort of, and I use hate sort of in a hyperbolic sense.
Well, we saw Lady Gaga, we saw Donald Trump.
Was ready to sort of
erupt. Well, we know that just because of her personality, she stepped on more than a few toes.
But I'm the sort of person that perfection buys you the right to act like an animal, to act like a uncivilized jerk.
Or if we want to use wrestling terminology, act like a heel.
A heel, yeah, sure.
And a heel face.
I think that maybe I'm misguided, but I do think, hey, you're perfect, just don't say anything too dumb, and have fun with it. Nobody can tell you to shut up.
I don't know, when you say to your biggest rival, Cyborg, we should talk about how this affects that possibility.
And this is another thing, by the way, this is...
But let me finish that before we move on. To even start to touch on that, when you tell your rival Cyborg that you don't care if she ejects semen into her eyes.
That's awful. I didn't know she said that. Jesus.
This was a while back.
What the hell's wrong with her?
Yeah. Yeah.
We love you, Ronda, but grow up. Fudge.
Yeah.
Goodness.
As Ted puts it, she always comes in. She always seems to be angry.
She's got a chip on her shoulder. Everybody has a tough life and whatnot. She's in a profession that lends itself to somebody who has that sort of personality.
Yeah,
and it's fun to watch. Nobody's saying it's not fun to watch. And and it's one of those things where, again, if you're like me, if you could back it up, talk all you want. but you are going to definitely eat a spoonful of your own, whatever you're saying when it comes back to you, and it did in a big way a couple weeks.
Something else I just thought about. I think it was AMMA. It was some MMA apparel company.
Anybody watching, retweet us. Sure, go on.
They put out a in octagon hit saying the first person to knock out Ronda Rousey gets, I think, like $1,000 bonus or something like that.
So
I think technically Holly just earned that bonus.
Who did this? I'm sorry,
I forget who. I'd like to say
it was like an independent group of people would have just been so happy to see her lose. It
was some smaller level MMA apparel.
That's pretty funny.
MMA apparel company. I'd like to say it was American mixed martial arts. I'm sure it's out there, but yeah, they put out an in octagon hit on Ronda Rousey saying first person to knock out Ronda Rousey gets $1,000 bonus check. So I was just thinking, Holly earned that check. So,
and even if they don't go for the immediate rematch, and it does throw a wrench into the Cyborg plans, like we had mentioned.
Yeah, but an interesting thing, Cyborg said that she still wants to fight Ronda.
Of course, I mean, sure, yeah, and it would still make for a pretty awesome fight.
Well, and something else that she pointed out,
it is diminished now. That fight is diminished, without a doubt.
Yeah, but something else that she did point out, she never wanted the belt. Like she was saying, I'm not interested in fighting Holly Holm. I'm not interested in the belt. I have a huge respect for her. But yeah, she's saying that she's not interested in.
It would have been for the sake of putting on a fight between two of the most popular and skilled female fighters today.
Yeah, but now I'm thinking that with that fight, with everything that was at stake at that fight now gone, Ronda essentially has Cyborg now has
leverage.
Yes, the leverage to negotiate and basically say, you need to meet me halfway now.
Yeah. Yes.
Whereas it used to be that even though Cyborg had been ruling for a longer time, they were basically saying there is no featherweight division in the UFC. You need to come down to fight her. And whereas now, arguably, a catchweight would probably have to be the way that they want to put that together.
And this is why I think that now also, really, I do think that her being knocked out was probably one of the best things that could have happened to women's MMA and MMA.
I've heard a lot of people saying that very, very often.
And not only that, but the way that in which it happened. I think one of the things I've
domination.
Not only that, but a sort of a cold knockout.
Honestly, I didn't even know.
It was an especially brutal knockout by any standards.
Yeah, honestly, at the angle at which she went out, I knew that she was like out to some capacity. I didn't know if she was just like rocked, or I didn't know if she was out cold. But
I know what you mean.
Look at other angles. When it happened live and I just saw her go down, I was like, this could be it.
She's just badly beaten, yeah.
I just thought this could be it. But then I saw it at the other angle, and she just goes, you just see that. I was like, she was out before she even hit the octagon floor.
Yeah, but thank you for. I unfortunately wasn't able to watch it live. Thank you for the text that night. I was able to then hop on social media and very quickly see the results, the bloody results.
Yeah, another shout out to Team Extreme Beast who hosted the party that watched it. Thank you very much.
Yes, next time I'll see if I can make it out. Thanks, Matt, for going.
Yeah, I've got a lot of people that I need to mention when I tweet this out. But,
yes.
So yeah, Ted Hef.
Hold on. Let me get back to the point though, which is that it was the best thing that could have happened. The manner in which it happened sort of addressed an issue that I've brought up to you several times, which is WMMA sometimes lacks the punch, lacks the power that I need when I'm watching mixed martial arts. That sort of brutal aspect is something that I revel in, for better or worse. And the dynamicism, if that's a word, of being able to see a fight finished in multiple ways, I felt like it might have been diminished a little bit in women's mixed martial arts, because the kinesiology, let's say, is not quite the same as it is in men, and sometimes you do not see as many knockouts, or at least as high a number of knockouts in WMMA.
Well, that was true until like the past year where you had Ronda knock out Bet Correa, and then you just had Ronda get knocked out by Holly Holm.
So pretty much with these two KOs back to back, you're right in including that Ronda Rousey knockout. I do think, but this one with the extra added caveat of a new women's mixed martial arts champion, that I think is, though people have their trepidations, I think is perfectly marketable as a foil to Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely perfectly marketable. And then I think a second victory then sort of puts her up in this territory with, well, first of all, it would probably make her the queen of the hill, undisputedly, obviously.
At least in the bantamweight division.
And it would also, she would sort of then become phase 2 of the face of women's MMA, let's say, for the UFC, and
you go from
with a moniker like, there you go, where you go from
this loudmouth talking, almost arrogant champion to this more humble, soft-spoken.
I mean, what's her moniker? What's her
preacher's daughter?
Right. I mean, such a again, though.
Which her dad was in her corner, by the way.
Well, that's nice to know.
It's she finished and then she goes out and then she's hugging her dad and stuff like that. her preacher dad.
It was very sweet. It was very sweet to see that. And so now the face of women's MMA has changed. It's still, like I mentioned to you a couple minutes ago, I think it's still pretty much the Ronda show in that it's sort of, the discussion is so Ronda centric. Holly beat Ronda, but it definitely, it opens up, it throws a monkey wrench, and also it creates hey man, let's see Holly versus Cyborg.
I think the immediate thing would probably be Holly versus Misha.
Yes. But I'm saying, let's see all of them now.
Yeah,
let's mysticism is broken. Let's just make things happen for the sake of having them happen.
Yeah, people were saying, Ronda's clearing out the division, blah 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 blah. Holly's the new champion. Holly has to face everyone in the division.
There you go.
And she didn't get too many people. She only had 2 fights in the UFC. Raquel Pennington.
Yeah. Both decisions. Am I correct?
And both decisions. And that's another thing. People weren't expecting this after she'd gone through what was considered long kickboxing match. Honestly, her first fight in the UFC I considered a little boring.
Yes,
I watched that fight. She was. It's like, but I don't think.
Do you think it's part of Jackson's genius?
Possibly.
Did you even consider that? I've considered that.
Well, yeah, something to remember is that, Raquel Pennington didn't have the grappling pedigree that Ronda had.
So why not get out there and just sort of win a decision? Don't look too impressive.
It looked like she was still looking for that knockout, but she was fishing for it.
Okay.
Whereas I don't think the goal, I don't think
ended up
there were different goals when going against someone like Pennington, who doesn't. I'm gonna be honest, just doesn't have the type of in-your-face style that Ronda has, versus Ronda, who has that in-your-face style. Greg Jackson is a very good tactician, and he came up with the style of, okay, here's what happened. Raquel Pennington, she's a mediocre fighter. You could go in there, you could use your kickboxing, you could use your boxing, you could use your striking. You're going to look for the knockout, but you're not going to try to force it. Whereas against Ronda, this is how he broke it down. Ronda's going to go out there, Ronda's going to blitz you. You use your boxing to chip her away. And then we're going to concentrate on countering her grappling. If the opportunity comes to knock her out, you knock her out.
There it is.
And it exactly happened where where Ronda slipped. Holly saw that and was like, oh, there goes.
Bam. And that was that. History was made. It was the most awesome and loudest head kick to happen since the Gonzaga Mirko Cro Cop fight, I do believe.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yes.
I can't think of a more intense head kick knockout since then, or at least one that was more spoken of within the MMA community and sports community at large since then. So it's awesome. I mean, fun to watch.
Yeah.
Where does that leave us?
Well, we should probably roll into that with a controversy with one of Holly Holm's sponsors.
Go, have at it.
Okay, so there's been recent news, and I learned this also from Ted Check, but this has been just a general internet thing as well. Is that Holly Holm, one of her obviously she's got enough of a name for herself because of her boxing and just her name in general that she's actually gotten a she's got some she's got some sponsors outside of the the exclusive
UFC?
the exclusive Reebok deal, and one of these sponsors is known for the production of PEDs.
All right. So she is now sort of linked to a company that has sponsored her, that has sort of that is involved in the manufacturing of performance-enhancing drugs.
Yes, and
But that's all that's been confirmed is that they sponsor her.
yes, but because of that association, people are now crying foul, saying, "Oh, she must be on PEDs, guilt by association, blah 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 blah." Well, here's the thing: number one, she hasn't tested positive. Number two. Number two, it takes a lot more than PEDs to beat somebody.
Yeah.
Especially on Ronda's level.
This is where you and I get into the without seeming presumptuous. It's where, because we've been fans of this sport that is more open to those sorts of discussions, we know what the nature of performance-enhancing drugs might really be compared to what cartoonish sort of notions the general public might have. And it doesn't make people like you and I as uncomfortable to think that on occasion, some of the people that we think are iconic and maybe even to a certain degree role models might use these things.
Yes.
But you and I don't moralize as far as that's concerned as much as others might. Because I feel like I personally know that these sorts of things are sort of linked to sports in general. There's money involved. It's sort of life or death for some of these people.
Yeah. Okay, so here it is. It's Intel Pharma is the sponsor. It's a Texas-based company.
A Texas-based company sponsors Holly Holm, and now she's coming under fire. And
it's subsidiary Jack Nutrition.
I think some of it is some of the stuff I've seen online by some dopes has been sort of, in my opinion, veiled in sexism a little bit. Some of the attacks are sort of harsh in the presumptions that they make about her simply because of, let's say, an example, her appearance or something along the lines of that.
Yes. And
that's completely and totally unfair and not cool of anybody to do, especially based off of no facts.
Yeah, and then on top of that, her manager Lenny Fresquez, who I'd say is kind of a little iffy himself, but he has done right by Ronda. He says that they were aware of it, but that doesn't. He's denying that she used any of it. So.
And that's all they need to do, and that's all they are forced to do until proven otherwise.
Yes.
Let's say.
Yes, this is.
I think from a PR perspective, she takes a hit. I highly doubt she continues to have them on as a sponsor, and that's whatever. She'll find more opportunities from here on out as the champ.
It's possible that she might still do it. It's just.
Okay, yeah, it is possible. I'm gonna guess that she will not, only because of her newfound position, and I feel like Dana White would be somebody that would be something he might want to himself control for the sake of the brand.
Yeah, well, it's also possible that maybe it also depends on what type of deal. If it's one of those month-to-month deals like a lot of these fighters have, and that's also a reason why a lot of these fighters end up losing sponsorships because of the Reebok deals, because they had these month-to-month deals and they just didn't renew after a while. It depends on if it's a month-to-month deal or if it's possibly one of maybe a little bit then that's based on specifically the outline of their contract. If it's locked in, they have to finish it. But yeah, if it's a month-to-month deal, then yeah, maybe Holly should consider maybe dropping them.
But again, the baseless accusations of sort of abuse, let's say, steroid abuse.
Yes.
We'll call it steroid abuse.
Yes, steroid abuse.
Let's not do it.
Yeah, to me, it's innocent until proven guilty. She doesn't have a track record of that, so I don't think
it's a non-issue.
Something I should point out is that a lot of people in the MMA community were quick to say that Nick Diaz was quote unquote innocent until proven guilty, but and then people were saying, oh, the positive drug test out of 3 drug tests came from I forget which Quest Diagnostics instead of WADA. It shouldn't count. A positive drug test, I hate to tell you, is a positive drug test. Granted, Quest Diagnostics is on a different level than WADA. WADA's up here. Quest is probably maybe down here. But
in terms of reputation,
yes.
Okay.
And other things.
Okay.
And then
your opinion is it's been ruled. It's been ruled.
Yeah. To me it's they're.
They're not the same argument. You're not. They're two separate. They're two. What would you say? Like they're two separate issues.
No, to me they're like pointing. To me they're like it's like the MMA community is almost going in different ways.
Yeah. Sure.
It's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Technically, Nick Diaz has been proven guilty.
Yeah.
Whether he gets cleared in appeals and gets his sentence shortened, it's a
non-comparison.
That has to happen on another level. That has to happen in appeals court.
And anyway, anybody bringing it up, it's a non-comparison because those two things are not one-to-one. Like you're saying, Nick Diaz having been proven to have failed a test for any sort of substance abuse, let's say, doesn't have anything to do with people speculating that Holly Holm might be doing something because she has a sponsor. Those are two separate issues. It's confirmed that Nick Diaz smoked a little bit of doobie. A little bit of that little doobie grass, and that's a separate issue for if people then want to call into question the penalty that he's gotten. That's after he's already been found guilty.
Yeah.
That's whatever. You scream at each other all you want, but you cannot look in the direction of Holly Holm, say she's taking steroids. Which she might not even be, which she isn't, which she's never been proven to have been, and then say, "Why didn't Nick?" It's typical MMA fan crying a little bit,
Yeah. MMA fans are a unique breed. Okay,
we love it.
Okay, so we've done a little bit of that. So I want to go over some. I just want to go over some more current fight cards, some reviews and previews.
Yep.
So the review I want to go over is going to be that of the Ultimate Fighter Latin America Finale 2, Magny vs. Gastelum, which happened 2 days ago.
Just 2 days ago.
Yes. 2 days ago in Monterrey, Mexico. And it was the main event was Neil Magny and Calvin Gastelum, and this was specifically in line with the with Gastelum being one of the coaches on the Ultimate Fighter, and kind of a funny thing, he actually made weight this time.
Pulled it off.
But then he lost to Neil Magny.
And that was a split decision, so it was a hard fought sort of five rounder.
Yes, 5 rounders.
They've expanded to 5 rounds on some of those, perhaps unnecessarily on some of those.
I think unnecessarily.
Some of them. Yeah. But then it's like you can't pick and choose. That's how it was at first, remember? They were picking and choosing. I like that approach because it was like, okay, pick the 2 people that we want to see fight for 5 rounds, but whatever. Go on.
So then also Ricardo Lamas defeated a featherweight Diego Sanchez. That's the lightest.
Very small Diego Sanchez.
Yes, that's the lightest weight class that he has been in.
and still not being able to pick up any traction. But God bless that young man.
As of late,
We just mentioned him earlier as well.
Is he young? Is he young?
Nick Diaz,
he's 30.
or rather Diego Sanchez.
He's 33. He could still be considered a young man.
He could still turn it around.
Okay. Then you had Henry Cejudo defeat Suerio Formiga. That has title implications. So
Cejudo defeats Yuzier Formiga by split decision.
Yeah, Yuzier Formiga.
Do you think that this? Go ahead.
He was definitely being considered for a title shot against Demetrius Johnson just because of the fact that there's really no one else to fight. He's fought everyone else. But then there's also Cejudo, so it's very possible that we could see Cejudo. This
might launch Henry Cejudo over to a contender slot.
He could be one fight, maybe even the next fight, fighting for the title. We could very well be seeing that. So there's that fight. Then there were the welterweight and light.
There was a one welterweight bout and another 2 lightweight bouts to round out the card.
The welterweight and lightweight bouts were the actual finales for the Ultimate Fighter Latin America too.
Okay.
And I did not watch this one. I watched the first season because I was interested in seeing that, but I did not watch this season. And then the last fight on the main card, it was Ephraim Escudero losing to Leandro Silva, Escudero being the other coach on the Ultimate Fighter.
So this card looks exceptionally unremarkable in that all the fights on the main card went to decision, and that is a bummer for those in Monterrey, Mexico, that they did not get to see a better card.
And half of the preliminary card fights also went to decision. Out of the let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Out of the 13 fights on the card, only 4 of them were finishes. That is underwhelming.
That is definitely underwhelming. And, hopefully, my goodness, hopefully they'll scale back on 1 or 2 of these cards next year and put some of these fights on
this was
undercard spread out elsewhere.
This was a finale, remember, for the for Latin America.
My apologies.
For your home country of Mexico.
Yes, it is. So, you know what?
But yes, it was very underwhelming, unfortunately.
I'll say this. We got off to a rocky start today. It ended up being once we got into the Ronda stuff and some of the stuff early on, it was pretty neat. We just got really sidetracked there like twice in a row with some of the stuff.
Yes. Oh, something I actually do want to go over before we actually go over a preview is that World Series of Fighting did something unique on the 20th. So on Friday, this is only the second time probably in this current decade that I know of that a promotion put on a 8-man one-night tournament
in the U.S.
Yes,
this happened in the U.S.
Yes, World Series of Fighting. This happened in Phoenix, Arizona.
Crazy.
I do not know how
I was gonna say I thought that was not allowed anymore.
I do not know. It's normally is not. You have to get special permission from the commission.
Were these not professional fights? Maybe
these were professional fights. How the commission even okayed this? I do not know.
The reason I asked Matt just now if it was a professional fight is because the only way that I could imagine that they might allow something like this to happen is if that the fighters registered some of these fights as exhibitions, and those don't count as. Yeah, because I was under the impression that if you were registered for a professional fighter, something along the lines of that you then had to be, there had to be sort of this period of time in which you got cleared by doctors before the fight. So it's hard to imagine that in a tournament where all the fights take place in one night that you would have that much time to go see a doctor.
Well, that's why they had reserve bouts.
Okay, so continue.
Yeah, so,
But this still would theoretically involve people fighting multiple times in one night.
Yeah, 3 times.
And did.
Yes.
Go on.
So, so it was the World Series of Fighting 25. It was it was just titled the lightweight tournament, and they're basically, it was basically to determine the next contender for Justin Gaeth's lightweight belt. Okay. So basically most of the fights were at welterweight.
Most of the fights.
Most of the fights were at lightweight. There were only 2 fights. Yeah, most of the fights were at lightweight. There were only 2 of them that, in fact, were not at lightweight. Those were both preliminary fights.
All right.
So the first round, it would the participants were Luis Palomino, Rich Petishnak, I think that's Joe Zeffirino, Brian Foster, Mike Ricci, Joe Condon, Islam Mamedov, and Jorge Pantino. So the winners for the first round were Luis Palomino knocking out Rich Petishnak.
And this happened Friday night. So Palomino
Yes.
knocks out Petishnak. What round did he knock him out in?
First round.
The first round knockout.
So
via,
that helped him in terms of the
endurance. So that would be so weird to be discussing one of these in 2015. An important part of a one-night tournament would be if you're competing to perhaps get the early fights over with as fast as possible so that you're as fresh as possible heading in to later fights. Something that we've seen before, for example, Josh Barnett's war against Nogueira on the night that he had to fight Crow Cop at the heavyweight Grand Prix, I believe in 2005 or 6. I'm sorry. That went a long way toward Josh Barnett pretty much not being in okay condition to continue a fight against somebody who was much fresher in Mirko Crow Cop. So he's able to finish the fight in the first round. He's sort of secured his semi-final spot now. Continue.
This is interesting. Okay, well,
I'm sure it unfolded like alternates had to come in and always.
yeah, there were some interesting twists here. So,
and I'm guessing this had to do with the fact that there are more stringent rules on how much one could compete at night. But go on.
Yes. Okay. So, the first round it was Luis Palomino knocks out Rich Petishnak. Zoe Zeffirino submits Brian Foster. Mike Ricci knocked out Joe Condon.
Okay.
And Islam Mamedov defeated Jorge Patino at the only decision, and these were the decision fights were only going to go 2 rounds. So that fight went the second round. But then here comes the twist. So after that first round, Mamedov tore his ACL and Ricci injured his hip.
Huh.
So
then this
and they did have a reserve bout. I don't know why they decided not to put the reserve guy in there, but instead they had the
losers.
Yeah, the losers were cleared.
The losers might have been the bigger names, and it might have earned the spots. I don't follow World Series fighting that much. They might have earned the spots, sort of the seed at an earlier time in the year.
I'm guessing Patino was not majorly injured, and Foster was submitted. So it must not have been a very bad submission. So they plugged those guys back in there, and
the show went on.
Yeah, and then a very interesting thing happened.
Go on.
The next round, Brian Foster knocks out Luis Palomino, and Zoe Zeffirino submitted Jorge Patino.
Where does this leave us?
This left us to the 2 guys who fought in the preliminary rounds fighting in the final.
Okay.
Brian Foster and Joe Zeffirino met again, and this time it was Foster who won.
This sounds
like a comedy of errors.
Yes. No. Yes. This sounds like Who's on First.
Who's on first? What's the ticket? I don't know.
So you're saying a guy that lost how many times that night won?
He lost once.
Okay. And won the tournament, huh?
Yeah, ended up winning the tournament.
Cool.
I don't know why they didn't stick that reserve guy in there. But
No, I'm sure they have their reasons. Good for the World Series of Fighting and putting on, I guess, successfully a one-night tournament. And congratulations to the victor. Who's the victor? Brian Foster. Congratulations on your knockout victory.
Gets the next.
Goodness God.
Gets the next next. Well, it was. I'd say that it was a good fight because only one of those tournament bouts went to a decision if you exclude the alternate.
All right. So not a bad card.
And then that excludes the controversy of if they'd fought for 35 minutes or something like that.
This is true.
Whereas you're normally only supposed to go 25 minutes. They actually in the recent Bellator tournament that they did, the light heavyweight tournament at the Dynamite card, they actually That's a little bit easier. A 4-man tournament, that's a little bit easier to do in one night.
Yeah. And I feel like also it's less jarring to a casual observer.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, of interesting note, but yeah, it was only one of those fights that went to decision. So, and these guys, so yeah, these guys were nowhere near that exhaustive limit. So
I mean, had things swung a different way, it might have actually been a pretty cool night of fights. I mean, I'm sure it still was.
Even though
what
there
you
were
mentioned,
injuries and whatnot,
what you mentioned was it was still an action-packed, a sort of night with finishes, and that's all one could ask for in many ways. It would have been neat to see it pulled off the way that it sort of is meant to be pulled off, which is the guy who wins the more fights in successions is the one who walks away with the crown at the end.
Yeah, instead of the guy who lost in the first round
and gets thrown in as an alternate over an alternate, even though they have alternates. It was weird.
Yeah.
So no, you brought
it wasn't. But yeah,
and it's in the books.
Yeah, it's in the books. So
where does this leave us, Matt?
That kind of reminds me of UFC 1. Yep. Those fights.
Which, if you haven't checked it out, I did Today in MMA History UFC 1 earlier this month. Go ahead and check that out.
Yes. So yeah, kind of an interesting thing with UFC 1. All the the fights weren't supposed to have time limits.
Okay. Yeah.
But all those fights ended in what could be considered a modern first round. They all ended within the first 5 minutes.
I'd never considered it that way. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was, but yeah, none of them went.
None of them went the distance.
Well, you consider that first fight where Jagard, what's the guy's name, goes against Lua Tele, the former sumo Rikishi, and then he goes in there and knocks the guy's teeth out.
Yeah, he does. Savate was serious business. Savat. Man, I mean, and that's something a lot of people don't. And really quickly, I guess, touch. So we're almost done, Matt. But I guess really quickly talking about UFC 1, that guy could have totally spoiled that party. Yeah, Gerard. What's his name? I just wrote the darn article. Let me find it.
It's kind of funny because I actually saw. I've seen the UFC Fight for a Generation documentary that Fox put out during the UFC's 20th, and Ken Shamrock was expecting to just go in there and submit everybody. He wasn't expecting to go in there and face Royce Gracie and get submitted in the second round.
Yeah, well, yeah, Frank Shamrock.
Ken Shamrock.
Sorry, Ken Shamrock. And I do believe I mentioned it in the article, was probably his biggest threat that night. Was very likely his biggest threat that night.
Yeah.
Was rather an individual who had the most experience in that sort of tournament and fight.
Yeah, because he was in Pancrase. He already started competing in Pancrase.
Yes, which was just that was mixed martial arts.
Yeah, so he was already used to this. This was like this was nothing. He went in there. He submitted his first round opponent. Gerard Gordeau.
There we are, Gerard Gordeau.
Yeah.
Gerard Gordeau.
Yeah, he went in there and submitted Patrick Smith, who actually would have a long career. Yeah, so he went out there and he submitted Patrick Smith, and he's thinking, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to submit all these people. And then he goes in there and he sees Royce Gracie, and he thinks he's never heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He thinks Royce Gracie is this karate guy, thinking, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to submit this guy. He goes in there and he gets submitted. He's like, what just happened?
That's what he gets.
Well, I can't blame him if you're thinking you're the only guy with actual grappling skills in the tournament. I mean, they didn't have any like American wrestlers in there. They just had, they had Ken Shamrock with catch wrestling.
I feel like the Gracie's very carefully selected.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, it was a Gracie run tournament.
But Ken could have thrown, and maybe it was that mystery behind who is this guy that helped. But Ken could have thrown both of those gentlemen, Gerard Gordeau and Ken Shamrock. I think either of them on a dime by some luck could have spoiled the night, and who knows how that would have affected the sport in the long run. Because as I mentioned in the article, and as you know, the Gracies were sort of very, very closely linked and involved to the organization of the first event.
Because Horion was one of the co-founders of the event. Yep. He's the guy who handpicked Royce to be the representative. He could pick any one of his brothers. He says, you know what, want my youngest, I want my least physically imposing brother because I want to prove that a little guy like Hoist can go out and beat. Well,
that a little guy like Hoist could go out and beat and really show off, and that's what the whole point was, showing off that with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, size doesn't matter, right? Or you can approach any combat situation or any fight that you might, or sort of defend yourself efficiently, even if you're facing somebody who's larger than you, and more physically imposing than you.
I think the point of that was that their father Helio was that kind of he developed Gracie Jiu-Jitsu because he had this much smaller frame compared to his brothers who were doing judo, and he looks at judo and he says, okay, let's see, if I do this differently, I do that differently, and he developed it based on that. He had his sons who turned out to be these much bigger guys because obviously the genes in the family.
Yep.
And then he gets a little Hoist, and obviously he trained Horion enough to where Horion was thinking, I want to prove that a little guy. It's like my brothers have proven themselves. My other brothers have proven themselves to be these great heroes. I don't think he was saying I want Hoist to shine. He was saying I want Hoist to prove the concept of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, and not only that, but not only that, but also it was that dual purpose where it's like we're gonna put in the guy who we actually within our family might technically believe to be one of the weaker practitioners.
Basically.
That's not saying that he wasn't. That is his fundamentals want him that tournament. But Royce Gracie is not remembered throughout time as one of the greatest grappling technicians, let's say.
Which I think is kind of an injustice in and of itself, but I think that also has to do with the passage of time and the evolution of the sport and stuff like that. But I guess we'll see how that all goes down when he
rematches what we mentioned earlier next year, right?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like now that they're older, the two are kind of a little bit more closer in at least physical and their physicality, for lack of a better word, than they were when they first fought. Because when they first fought, Ken Shamrock has admitted to taking steroids, and he was a big 240-pound wrestler who had been training catch wrestling and was basically looking into long-term going to a pro wrestling career. Whereas Hoist was this little scrawny 180-pound, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Nowadays, I think Hoist probably walks around at like 185. So I'm not gonna say he's gained a huge amount of weight, but maybe.
Yeah.
But Ken shrunk. We've seen that Ken shrunk, and he was so small in his last fight with Kimbo Slice that they had to call it a catchweight bout because he weighed under 205.
Goodness.
I'm like thinking, you couldn't have just drunk a bottle of water. You couldn't have just drunk 2 bottles of water and then you'd be 206 and it'd be fine.
Yeah, well, so what do you think, Matt? Got anything else?
One last thing I'd like to go over is this weekend. It's the exclusive UFC Fight Pass fight card. The UFC's debut in South Korea. Henderson versus
Masvidal.
And
this is the ex-featherweight. Featherweight for lightweight?
Masvidal?
No, Ben.
Oh, Benson? Ben? Yeah. Lightweight.
Apologies.
You were a few weight classes.
What do you want me to tell you?
Yeah. But of note, this is at welterweight because he was really supposed to be facing Thiago Alves.
Ben moved up?
I think this is temporary because the last guy he faced, I think this is temporary because the last guy he faced, even though he beat him, he was kind of smaller. So I think he's realizing, okay, I should probably stick with lightweight.
Yeah, maybe.
But he was originally supposed to face Thiago Alves, who I should note is not a light welterweight.
No, he's a big dude.
Yeah, but
That would have been fun to watch.
Yeah, and but Alves got injured, so
Now we're left with this guy. Just kidding.
So Masvidal and
Jorge Masvidal and Henderson will be headlining the main event this weekend. And
this is relevant because Henderson is half Korean.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah. So he's sort of that's an easy way to market him over in South Korea.
Yeah, they're saying one of our sons is
also on the card.
Also on the card, Dong Hyun Kim versus Dominic Waters.
Another fighter of Korean origin.
It's too bad that we can't put that. It's too bad that they couldn't put the Korean Zombie in there, but he's serving his mandatory military service, 2-year military service.
Good man. Yeah,
so he's while he's doing that, and it's unfortunate they couldn't put him on the card. But okay, and then Yoshihiro Akiyama.
This is Sexyama, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason why they're putting him on here, he's half Korean.
Yeah. He's been somewhat a divisive figure in Eastern sports for a while. In that there have always been these sort of weird racial tensions, if I understand correctly, between Koreans and Japanese folk, and he
that goes back to
yeah.
And then Chan Sung Jung was making the whole issue of Hayabusa doing the sun rays,
mm-hmm.
and he's saying that's equivalent to the Nazi symbol. And
yeah, sure, yeah.
I don't necessarily agree. Maybe because of the fact,
bit dramatic.
Maybe because of the fact that I've lived in Japan.
And they certainly don't feel that way about it.
That flag is still there. But then again, there's also some Japan doesn't always want to admit to some of the wrongs that the country has.
Well, from their perspective, blah, but not politics MMA.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that flag is still very strong in the.
So that argument might be null if they view it a certain way that other people can't say, right?
Yeah.
If it
was that flag and it was banned in the country, that'd be one thing. Like the Nazi symbol, that's banned in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Germany, you can't even raise your hand in Germany. You know how they raise their hand? They lift their finger. That's how they raise their hand in Germany.
Let's wrap it up.
Yeah. Okay. So then I'm not even gonna mention anybody else.
We're gonna go over it afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not gonna mention anybody else because it's not really worth it. It's a regional card. They put mostly Koreans on there,
which we have nothing but the utmost respect for athletes from all nations.
Yeah, but it's just most of these guys are just unknowns.
And we're on a time crunch. We've talked so much today.
Yeah,
haven't we?
Yes, we have. I think we made a lot of progress.
Yeah.
So and then unfortunately, because of all the setbacks that we had, and because of the fact that I forgot the
bag.
Yes, the Hall of Fame bag. We haven't been able to do the Hall of Fame discussion today, which
so the Hall of Fame discussion is forthcoming.
Yeah, but next week is next week though I'm gonna release the results of the votes because we got the votes. I'm closing that vote soon.
Yes.
So and then we'll release the MMA Freak Hall of Fame class of 2015 next week.
But we'll do something to give them the sort of moment in the limelight that you wanted to give them. You know what I mean? The Hall of Fame discussion. If you want.
Yeah. The bag will definitely come back probably next year, but we'll talk about instead I think we'll talk about each of the inductees.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Is what we'll do.
That's perfect.
And then we'll keep the Hall of Fame bag for discussions so that we could get caught up on this podcast. For them
with our Hall of Fame members.
Yes, for subsequent years.
Perfect.
So, yeah,
keep that going. We'll get the Hall of Fame discussion going soon again.
Yeah. So next week is the Hall of Fame results are going to be released. I'm going to we're going to publish that.
Stop by the site, please. MMAfreak.com. MMA-freak.com.
Yes, and then at MMA Freakout is our
Twitter handle.
And
yours.
And of note, we are working on doing some tweaks with the site, making it look a little bit better, a little bit more streamlined. So
keep an eye out for that. Eventually, we're going to be having more content placed up there by our buddy Jim Graham over at the Beyond the Cage podcast. We've been in contact with him, and that is
And of course, Ted is
Ted Check, who we've posted videos up on the site, right?
Yep.
He's on board now. He's sort of a MMA Freak contributor as well now. So
yes, my brother is looking at joining the site. And of note, for those of you in the Southern California area, we will be looking to
recruit some of you. Why not?
Yes, we will be looking to recruit relatively soon.
If you love MMA, go ahead and contact us.
And we'll also be doing some revisions with the podcast over the next.
We've talked about a couple of things.
I'd say we're probably gonna. I'd say when we fully implement it, it's probably gonna be after the new year.
Yes,
because we've got stuff going on. We're both working people. This isn't our full-time job, so it'll be nice.
We do.
It will be nice when this becomes our full-time jobs, but
and we do our best.
Until then, we're just doing this for the passion of it.
Yeah.
So we'd like to thank all of you for viewing. Let's see. So we mentioned the
MMA MMA Freakout, MMA-Freak.com,
and your Twitter.
My Twitter handle is Edson_V. Edson_V.
My Twitter handle is @Matthew Sulzer. And we'd also like to say Happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Please be safe in all your traveling. Please be safe, Mr. Valenzuela. You're going up to Seattle, right?
Oregon.
Yeah, I'm just heading out to Corona, so it's not that far.
Not that far.
Not that long of a drive, but still. So please be safe, all of you. And
happy holidays, everybody, and keep enjoying the fights, and we'll be back to catch up on you with you.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Yep.